as the psychedelic renaissance is happening, I see how much people are actually confused and don't really know some of the ancient practices that have a lot to offer in terms of, perspective, information, and also inheritance.
Mhm.
And how also the psychedelic therapies are enclosing and really objectifying somehow, because it's part of the medical system, the substance in a particular context. So I've been really working and offering a way to cultivate oneself, to integrate the indigenous, wisdom, to shift your capacity to engage with your environment as sacred, to understand that we are in a field of energy. And then you can activate that perception. You can root yourself in that activation and develop your capacity of holding an intention and to pay attention to what's emerging.
C'est beau.
C'est bon.
François Demange, nice to meet you and have you on the podcast, man. I've been listening to your music for what, 5 years since the first release, Contact, under the name Metsa. So it's great to meet you and get to know you a little better.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It makes me realize, man, I haven't produced anything in 5 years. It's awful. But the second album is coming out soon. It's done. We've just been waiting to release the second one. So I'm very grateful that the music is traveling and touching people's heart.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, I thought it was a Shipibo guy that someone had gotten into a studio and done some nice little studio touches, so it sounds a little more modern and produced than, putting a mic in front of a curandero in a maloca somewhere. There's some nice delay and effects and things like that. So I was like, wow, this sounds really authentic, but it also sounds kind of modern and it's very musical. So I just like immediately fell in love with it. It was my favorite album of Icaros I'd heard, and then I find out no, it's this French guy.
Yeah, French Parisian, which is kind of weird, right? How did I end up singing in Shipibo, Quechua, and all those different modalities? And I guess it was in the cards for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I'd like to, just if you could share with the people listening a little bit of your background, like what led you to the Amazon in the first place?
Yeah, no, totally. I think being born and raised in France in a particular context, and also in a very favored, I would say, bourgeois Persian family, the conditioning and the cultural context is particular. People explore the world, I think, and travel and have an education. But most of my old friends, they are kind of in the same context where they were born and working kind of the same arenas, most of them, than their folks, or expand to different directions. But that's a very different cultural context. And very young, I was kind of in research for things that were different. I think I had a huge trauma as a baby, as a young boy, for the separation of my mom, which made me very uncomfortable in myself and very at ease with my environment. So I had to always find a way to operate in life, to kind of ground and understand a high sensitivity and care for humans. Always wanted to connect with, I don't know, the simple people, the people, was giving away my toys and, hanging out on the street and exploring. And then I was very lucky to travel in Asia, India, Nepal, Thailand, Indonesia, and it really opened my eyesight and to other ways of spiritual path. And then I went in my teenage, early 20s into a really dark moment of exploration and substance abuse and touching really pushing, I guess, the frontier of experimentation. And I was really looking differently how to connect. And you know, the universe has a plan for you. And life kind of waits for the right curve to put you in connection with opportunities. And I was already exploring the shamanistic, natural healing modalities, energy healing work in France a little bit. And someone had talked to me about ayahuasca plant medicine, had talked to me about a place in Peru, and it stayed with me, even though I moved away from France. I started to live in Colombia, and my life was very messy, disorganized.
Hmm.
But
Oh, just a little pause there. So
yeah,
you moved to Colombia not seeking ayahuasca, you went for some other reason.
yeah, my first time abroad was actually in Brazil. I went to Brazil for a year in I was 21, I believe. And I was looking really into music and dance.
Hmm.
And there I had a powerful experience really connecting with the Afro-Brazilian culture, the capoeira, and all that spiritual aspect, very magical, very powerful, beautiful African heritage.
Hmm.
I came back to France really and tried to reintegrate myself, I guess, in that family nucleus. I work with my dad, and then I was not happy, you know. But my dad passed away, and a bunch of stuff happened that kind of pushed me a bit in a certain position in relation to my family, and then I married early with a Colombian lady and decided to move to Colombia. I was having a hard time already, you know. I was abusing heroin, and that was not good.
Hmm.
I was not totally dysfunctional, but I was starting to really getting sick and not really, you know, being free from the desire of connections that I was looking for was not manifesting. And so Colombia was a kind of a sideways to put myself in a different culture and be closer to what Brazil had meant for me, you know, and also to get away from my surroundings and old friends. And there I had a bit of an awakening, realizing actually that it was not the life that I wanted. I was kind of recreating the same life, the French, you know, culture life, but in Colombia, having a job position and trying to make money and being in that image relation to society. And it's very nice, but it's not what I wanted. And
Hmm.
so same patterns start to emerge. And I was already in South America for 3 years when that information about Peru and ayahuasca came back to me. And it was clear that this is what I needed to do. I had also by then divorced and went through almost an early death experience through substance abuse. And so I
Hmm.
had really, you know, finished the cycle, explore as far as I could have gone with substances, and I had already cleaned my act and started to be clean and realizing I don't want to do this. You know, it's not interesting anymore. I basically seen it all. You know, what's the
Yeah.
next frontier for me?
Hmm. Yeah. Your story is making me think about something that I've considered before. Like so many of us who find our way to the medicine path or to plant medicine, shamanic healing, early on, we get involved with substance use and a lot of kind of reckless exploration of different psychedelics or alcohol, things like that. And I always think that it's, because in our cultural context, we don't have clear rites of passage and initiation, that often, maybe it's like what we're seeking is a kind of initiatory process or looking to expand our mind, but we're using like the wrong substances in the wrong way. But the impulse is there to learn and to expand our consciousness and connect with the natural world or to get out of ourselves, all that kind of thing. I mean, what do you think about that perspective?
Yeah, it's a perspective that Mircea Eliade talks a lot about in his anthropology survey on shamanism, that, Burning Man and all those movements are also somehow an initiation, a desire of a community to connect and explore and going in that journey of connectivity and that language, somehow spirituality. And it is true that, we don't have that. And the values also are very disconnected to nature. Nature as a spiritual entity, nature as a living consciousness that you can engage with. And I was feeling with that desire, with that, need to understand and connect with that. And it was not offered whatsoever in my culture of origin, which is also a beautiful culture. It's just different values and different system. And so substance abuse and abusing, yourself in a certain way and exploring, you're kind of a bit of renegade of where you're from. And you're
Yeah.
also looking at ways to expand yourself and to find a relationship that would make sense. So when you find a culture that has still a use and a system of healing and of meaning, a language of engaging with nature as spirit, when you are in that research, then suddenly things start to align and make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, it's like I felt it like, finding yoga, which is a technology to help you participate in the intelligence and rhythms of nature, and then finding, the shamanic use of plant medicines. It felt to me like a homecoming, like it was something I was seeking ever since I was a little boy.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's not necessarily through psychedelics that we can find that path.
Mm.
It's just really to be able to be in that rhythm and have whatever discipline we put in place to really change our nature of how we engage and relate to one another and to oneself. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
So talk about what it was like for you. You got this, it came back to you, this idea of going to Peru and working with ayahuasca. I think you went to Jacques Mabit, his center Takiwasi first, right?
Yeah, it was a bit how I landed. I had done a bunch of sweat lodges with this French guy who spent time on the Indian reservation in Rosebud or Pine Ridge in South Dakota in the US. And then when I left France to go to Colombia, he mentioned this place, Takiwasi, this center in the Peruvian Amazon, in the foothills of the Andes, where you can explore the ayahuasca and spirituality, but you can also connect with the training modality and have access to the local healers. And he said to me, this is going to be in your path. There's a very strong chance that this is going to be good for you. And I didn't really pay attention. And at the time, after my exploration in Colombia and what I went through, I was ready to leave Colombia and I was going to go back to Brazil, where I had a very powerful, sense of connection. I had a good rhythm and discipline with capoeira and music. And that later came back. Somehow it made it
Mm.
through those 3 years, through my transition from France to Colombia. And it just impacted me that right at that time, as I was cleaning up my mess, I found that document, that letter. And it was obvious that this is what I needed to do. So I just packed everything, took a backpack, and went to Peru.
Mm.
And I arrived there really with the certitude somehow that this was the way for me, that after everything that I had went through, there was no other way than just to embrace. And the circumstances, how the letter came back, the timing, it was kind of the universe telling me, you're supposed to do this.
Mm.
So I arrived in Takiwasi saying, well, I'm here to learn. And they looked at me and said, do you want to try first? Or it was a bit like kind of, and I was like, I do whatever, but I have a strong sense that this is a path for me.
Hey, I want to take a moment to speak with you about this channel. Currently, only 11% of viewers are subscribed to the channel. I think those numbers are terrible. So if you're enjoying this content and you want to help out the channel, please take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe. And if you really want to help out the channel, you can become a member of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon, which will give you access to early release of full ad-free episodes, plus access to the archive of the first 100 episodes of this podcast. It would really help me out and allow me to keep creating content like the interview that you're watching right now. Okay, thanks so much. Now, back to the interview. Yeah. And my understanding, what I've heard over the years about Takiwasi is they're very regimented. Like you have to make, I think, a 3 or 6 month commitment to their particular program. It's not a place that you can just kind of float in and out of. Was it that way when you went?
Well, in 96, things were a little different. I mean, Takiwasi came really out of Jacques, that I think was working from Médecins Sans Frontières initially. He was doing some research on traditional Amazonian medicine or indigenous folklore and start to hook up with Rosa Giove, who's a naturopath Peruvian doctor. And they start to look into ayahuasca and how does it work and how do ayahuasqueros, practitioners have access to the diagnosis? How can they drinking a substance that altern your perceptions, see the pathology in the body? So from a medical standard point of view, I think there was a lot of interest in doing research, and particularly in the application of substance abuse. So it was born with that intention, and there was a whole team around Jack that was kind of family. And Jose Campos, who now has his own, healing center in Peru, Dionisio Santos, Javier Zavala, Jacques Mabi, his brother Michel, and Rosa. There was really a different heart. And then it evolved as they had to design stronger protocol. They got funded from the French government and the European Union. And then it imploded, actually. The whole team, got dispersed when I was there. And I think everyone needed to find their own ways. So it was not as rigid, but they definitely asked me to commit for 6 to 8 months and to do their protocol as a patient before making any decision. I didn't have an agenda. I went out there with the idea of starting over. And so I just went along, and it was great for me because it was a place where I could connect a little bit with my culture, have a sense of orientation to integrate the experiences, but also very quickly found my way into the local indigenous culture and my own relationship with the local healers. Takiwasi was a sort of a hub where a lot of local shamans came to practice. Don Solunteyo, Guillermo Arevalo, Walter and Eusebio Cuniaci, which are Awaluns, and other people around. So I had access to them. And then at the end, I developed my own relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when did the music really start to connect with you?
You mean when did I decide to do the prod, or?
Well, you went through the protocol, so you're having ceremony and doing their whole cleaning process. But was there a moment like in ceremony where you heard the music from the healers and it really connected with you? Because I mean, you really went far with it. I mean, you know these songs and you've learned Shipibo and so I'm just wondering about that initial experience of where the music really struck you.
Yeah, I mean, my second ceremony was extraordinary. Actually, my first ceremony was with Jacques and Jérémy Narby, who's a pretty well-known writer who wrote Cosmic Serpent, which is a great book about ayahuasca.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
great. Yeah,
Swiss
and
Canadian. Hmm.
exactly. And nothing happened that night. I was very disappointed. It was also great that I came all that way with all this idea that, serpents were going to talk to me or I'm going to talk to spirits, and flat. And so
Mm.
that was great in a way. But the second time Jose Campos was running the ceremony. I was with the patient of Takiwasi, and it was very strong. And then as the singing was going on, I could understand the articulation of what's held in the intention, what the songs are bringing in energetically into the room, and how it's working on the patients and what it's doing. So I had a very strong experience of having access to people's energies and seeing the interaction. And then going to ceremony, I started to just participate in the singing and learn just by the participation. A lot of the songs initially are much easier than singing in Shipibo. A lot of, repetitive songs, Sunalai songs, the Ayahuasca Yari songs that are more Quechua la Mista songs, actually, and where you just call a plant, connect to the essence, and then spread its energy around through repetition. Then you go to the next one and you do the same thing. So initially it was cool to be able to just find myself in that repetitive motion without having to think about the elements of the meaning and the construction of the phrasing and all that, which is much more complex. And I did that for years, I was learning Icaros, and I learned my first Icaros in Quechua because Jacques, teacher, actually, Aquilino Chujandama, is a Quechua Lamista, and his grandson, Orlando, and I were very good friends. And we're still very good friends to this day. We actually contribute and work together constantly. And Orlando was helping me out, understand the Icaros, how to learn Icaros, how to sing Icaros. And then it takes time. You just need to be in the practice. You need to go and do your dietas so you can root your understanding, root yourself in that relationship of singing from a place of holding the field of medicine. And that in that process, you get all sorts of experiences. You go through a process, of facing yourself, trying to understand what's going on, and, try to connect to source without distraction. It is later that I then met Guillermo Arevalo, who was one of my main teachers for a long time. And this is where I got exposed to the Shipibo singing, which is for me very particular, because of their the way they speak directly to the vision, to what they see. And as they're acknowledging what they're seeing, they're bringing other elements in their singing to transform the vision and by default to impact the energy of the patient or the room. It's very, very cool system of interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. Just maybe for listeners who aren't as familiar with the different styles of
Sure.
singing that they might experience in the Peruvian Amazon, in my experience, there's like a mestizo style, which tends to be quite repetitive, kind of easy melodies, easy rhythms, and those can be a lot more accessible to pick up on because the language is very simple, and like you said, they repeat quite a lot, and maybe you just change the name of the plant that you're singing to, but there's a kind of template for it. But then when I experienced the Shipibo singing, it seemed so much more like jazz. Like it seemed improvised, it seemed very free form. The melodies were very soaring. There was a lot of dynamics going from really low to very high. It was a totally different thing, and I just when I first heard the Shipibo singers, I thought, oh, these are like the John Coltrane of the Icaros.
Yeah, I hear you. I felt exactly the same. Yeah, totally. And then, when it's full circle after those almost 30 years now, I can sing in this mestizo song and be in the same feeling of the Shipibo, because then you have more freedom because you're very rooted, in how you're holding source. And we can talk about those mechanisms. And so then you explore how to push tonalities and how to with, there's also an element of healing in the beauty, in the harmony, in the intention of care that you hold in your heart, and how you care about the energy and the people. And so you sing with that, and it's really felt in the healing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've often felt that, well, my yoga guru, in his particular lineage, he would say that chanting opens the heart. And it doesn't really matter like what deity you're connecting to, but you have to feel it in your heart. It's about the mantra, and I would say the Ikaro singing is a vehicle for that connection, not only to find that in yourself, but also then to transmit that feeling to the patient or the person being sung to. Would you say that that is accurate in your experience?
I think it's totally accurate. And in my first years, starting to carry ceremony and to open and lead ceremonies, I didn't know much, you know. I had maybe 6, 7 years of experience with a few dietas, but I was very eager to be, holding ceremony and grow. And I was operating more from the heart because you have less access to really the technique. So you're more innocent in a way,
Mm.
and people really felt it. And then as you grow in the technique, you don't want to get away from that, but you can be very also uh, in a complex articulation of songs,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, like the
but
virtuosity takes over the
yeah,
feeling. Yeah.
yeah,
It's the same
yeah,
same with any music, I'd say. You
yeah,
can become
exactly.
very technically adept and maybe lose some of that the kind of pure naive feeling that's there in the beginning. Yeah. Mm.
And I like to come back to that simplicity,
Mhm.
because there is something very powerful about it. The repetition and simplicity, and just to sing it and sing it over with a smile, with pushing for the love and extending that, and it carves little by little whatever resistance there is there. It's really
Mhm.
cool. Yeah.
Well, that's nice to hear from someone who, like, you're very accomplished in your ability to sing more complex songs and things like that. And I've felt, for me, I have got like these little like childlike icaros that I sing when I go to the ocean or when I go on my morning run and the sun is coming up over the trees. And I think, well, that's where I'm at in terms of my ability is like these little children's nursery rhyme type medicine songs.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it because the feeling is there, but I'm very, I admire people who can really go off with the singing.
Yeah. But I think, that mind comparison is very human, and it's very us as Westerners. And I also was so eager to sing in Shipibo, I was so eager to be able to be in that complexity. And the most powerful one actually as the simplest one
Hmm.
that carries that innocence, and that child energy, because that's where you can't beat that.
I know, and that's kind of like the healing returns you to that kind of natural state you were in as a child. So it makes sense to me that that a nursery rhyme or a simple childlike Ikaro would be a kind of conduit to bring you back to that kind of sense of openness and awe and wonder and joy and just being alive, which is, where I think we want to get back to, right?
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah. And what also was super interesting for me was to experience singing ikaros or singing ceremonial song from different tradition in the context of ayahuasca ceremonies, and to see how their consciousness or their energy also brings a different feeling,
Hmm.
and people that never got exposed to the Lakota ways or the Sundance ways or Sweat Lodges suddenly had this heart open because of the drum beat and those push-ups, as they call them, and you sing them a little different. You sing them softer, and you play them in the context of the ceremony. Or now I sing a lot those water songs, which are two verses, and just working with water. But you just sing two verses, but in so many different tonalities and rhythm that you kind of weave them in and just holding, the power of water, which is the first medicine, to
Mm,
just do its thing in the healing for the
mm.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. When I was visiting Juan Flores at Mayan Tiaku, the way he did his ceremonies was very communal. People would paddle down the river on, Wednesday night when they knew it was ceremony every 2 nights, so they knew when it was happening, and people would just show up. And he invited the whole circle to sing. If you felt called to sing, he would go around the circle and you would have an opportunity. So it was really interesting to be in those ceremonies because I would hear, the Shipibo guy would show up, so he'd sing a Shipibo Ikaro. And, Juan himself, it's more like that mestizo style. He's Ashaninkan, but it's very repetitive, very rhythmic. He's got like a family melody, it feels like, where there's like, how would I say it? It's like a kind of a signature melody of his, and that he'll adapt to different plants and different healing songs. But I started to recognize, oh, this is like his signature melody that he always goes back to, which is cool. And then, someone else who is visiting might sing a Santo Daime hymn. And so just to have that experience of like, yeah, the way different songs work in ceremony was, from like a kind of musical anthropology perspective, just
Yeah.
I can't help but bring that. Like, I want to study music. It was very interesting to experience that firsthand.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful to have the people with the capacity, you know, to sing properly. The
Mm.
difficulty is when people want to sing and it's a little confused or it's not
Oof,
necessarily
it's rough.
harmonized, and they're not aware because they're so self-absorbed with, the desire to be heard, or they just want to also just share from a good
Yeah,
place.
they want to
But
contribute, and that's beautiful, but man, it
yeah,
can be it can be rough when the pitch is off, and it can make you
yeah, I
sick.
know exactly. So I myself, I've tried to open the space a few times, and I do. And I also, like, I'm known to run a tight show in a way.
Mm,
But what I've done a lot in the past and collaborate with Rainer Schoenbrandt, which is an incredible guitar player who trained a lot in Brazil with carioca and a
mm,
different way to hold, ayahuasca ceremonies and the icaros. And so we would start more traditional with the icaros, and then I would give him the floor and he would just bring the guitar and sing his own icaros after the doctoring rounds, just also to bring that beauty of music in. And
mm,
then we will collaborate on instruments and stuff. Really
mm.
nice. Yeah.
After the doctoring rounds, like after the kind of the big healing stuff and the rough passages are done, here's something like kind of sweet and a little more soft, so you can take a breath and relax.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah,
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 sometimes you want relief from, if you're working with a curandero who's like very kind of like tough,
yeah.
it's like, give me a break, man. Just like give me like one song that's just like sweet and chill.
Totally. Or sometimes, nothing's happening and the silence is held. And people are like, when is he gonna sing? Or what's
Yeah.
going on? Or when is she starting? And it's also very powerful. Yeah.
Well, to be able to tolerate the silence, yeah. Like sometimes I think don't the songs function as a kind of like anchor for people so they don't get totally lost on their own journey? Isn't it a way to keep them kind of in contained?
Yeah, I mean, there's different songs for different things, and it depends what's going on, Every ceremony has its own quality, and people bring their own luggages
Mm,
into the room. And so if you're with a group that is pretty grounded already and has a lot of experience, you can also hold something different.
mm,
I've experienced and explored collective consciousness in the space of ayahuasca, where we just start not with individual intention, with people who wanted help with that particular aspect or exploring that particular thing. We just hold a collective intention to grow together in our capacity to connect to a higher collective consciousness that is part of our humanity and part of the life force.
Mhm.
And so we hold that in silence first, and then a singing starts on the drum with a verse and a call and an answer.
Mhm.
So, I would start with a call and the group would do the answer. So then everybody's singing if they want to. But then I would let go of the call and just drum. And anyone in the group who wants to pick up and be the caller or the leader would jump in.
Mhm.
And so it would create this, change in the power holder.
Mhm.
And it's very liberating. And then when we stop singing, also the feeling would be very different because everybody's involved and we're holding something collective. And this, it's interesting also to explore different modalities like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm finishing up a book that deals with the relationship between Western psychotherapy and psychedelics and plant medicine. And, I think we need to find our own way as Westerners working with these substances that isn't defined by Western medical psychiatry and the whole kind of clinical setup. So I'm advocating that we learn more from traditional cultures who've been working with these plants for healing for generations and generations. But we don't just extract what they're doing, but we find, the essence of what they're doing, and we find a proper adaptation for our own culture and our own time. And I think like the spirit of experimentation is really crucial right now. Like we have to find our own way with these plant medicines. We can't just appropriate directly. That's not going to work for the patients because they come from a particular cultural context, right? And so I think like what I'm advocating for too is that spirit of experimentation, rooted in real learning. Okay, like I've learned from these people, I can understand the essence of why it works the way it does. And so then from that, I can start to experiment and create like maybe a new art form of ritual.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you're saying. I mean, in general, I think that intention is fundamental. I'm totally in the same journey, in the same boat than you. And I've came out myself, I'm mostly a ceremonial person. And I've chosen to develop my skills there and to stay in that realm because I wanted to really develop, an understanding, a relationship with the medicine, a relationship with the art of singing and healing in that particular context. But as the psychedelic renaissance is happening, I see how much people are actually confused and don't really know some of the ancient practices that have a lot to offer in terms of, perspective, information, and also inheritance.
Mhm.
And how also the psychedelic therapies are enclosing and really objectifying somehow, because it's part of the medical system, the substance in a particular context. So I've been really working and offering a way to cultivate oneself, to integrate the indigenous, wisdom, to shift your capacity to engage with your environment as sacred, to understand that we are in a field of energy. And then you can activate that perception. You can root yourself in that activation and develop your capacity of holding an intention and to pay attention to what's emerging.
Mhm.
And there are some cool results. We've been running this online training modality, Being and Becoming, this year with my wife, Kelly, who's an naturopath doctor and a Chinese herbalist and a Qigong practitioner. And some mental health practitioners have come, psychiatrists that facilitate, psychedelic therapy, and they start to apply those modalities in their practice. And they see actually how their capacity to engage and hold grows. So
Mhm.
there is one thing to learn a tradition, and there I think we all need to, if we want to do that, to go back to source and be part of the culture for a while. So you can understand the cultural context, the language, the value system, the articulations, how people operate with those modalities. But there is also what you're saying, an important moment that is happening in our Western culture where we're at this crossing, and it's part of our humanity, it's part of our capacity that we need to rediscover in our Western culture because we have separated ourselves from nature. We have objectified nature, in the
Hmm.
language. But indigenous people haven't.
Hmm.
They've kept that deep understanding relationship with it. And so we can reorient ourselves to hold that beautiful relationship.
Yeah. There's a teacher, Martin Prechtel, who was born
Yeah.
in America. He calls himself a half-breed. His mom was Native American, but he found his way into a traditional Mayan village, and he apprenticed to be a ritual elder and all of that. And so then he came back, and he had a lot of that wisdom to share, and he was speaking as this person who'd kind of been in both worlds. Um, and I love what he says about us all having an indigenous soul.
Yeah, totally.
And that particular relationship with the natural world, with the spirit world, it's in us all. And we have to just kind of, like you said, rediscover that as people who have been disconnected for so long. Like, there's a reason why the colonial countries have traumatized so many indigenous people. It's because they suffered that original trauma, that disconnection from the natural world, which led them to then traumatize others by trying to disconnect them as well. So I think like we have to find our way back to that somehow.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, obviously, the values also and the system in place with religion, the civilized man was someone who was Christian, and there was those established systems where, anything else was devilized
Hmm.
or from the devil. And so, of course, there was this imposition that happened and castration in a way of their abilities. Thank God, a lot of them have been able to keep this practice alive, you know.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it is very important. And also, it's important to say those things in the emergence of the woke movement that also claims a lot of times that only indigenous people or people from a certain descendants have the right to practice or just to express those lineages. I think it's just part of our human inheritance, and we all have the right to do so. Always when we also pay attention and aware to where it's from, and we give the respect that it deserves.
Hmm.
But definitely, yeah, this is where I
Yeah.
stand today. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, to cut ourselves off from learning from indigenous people, intact cultures, we're then cutting ourselves off from the kind of healing and therapy that we need as disenchanted, disconnected, rationalistic Western people. Um, you know, we have to recover soul somehow. And who better to help us than people who never lost it in the first place?
Yeah, totally. And there is a friend of mine was mentioning this morning, this spiritual loneliness that we're experiencing
Hmm.
in the West, I think,
Totally. Yeah.
And so understanding actually that the water listens or the space listens, that the tree are singing, that the wind
Hmm.
carries your voice, that your words are a vibration of sound that has somehow a weight in the space that you're in, that they carry your intention and they carry the emotional realm of who you are. So I can talk about it, it sounds poetic, but how to really root yourself in that articulated expression where you can really create motion into it, awareness, discerned awareness, and not some
Hmm.
sort of the disillusion or illusion about it. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm totally with you. for me, it is so practical. So, as an example, I told you before we started recording that we had major windstorms here on the South Island past couple days, and so the other night, trees were falling down all around our house, and one hit my friend's car out front, and it was very wild. So I was sitting out on our back deck, and we're surrounded by a lot of cedars.
Right.
And the cedars grew up on this island. They know how to handle the wind. They just like they can bend so far, and so they're dancing. And but I was a little scared. There was like branches flying through the air, and power was out, and transformers are exploding, lighting up the sky. I mean, it felt really crazy. But the only response I had was to start singing to the cedars to protect us and to protect our home. And it's everything you said. It's the song, sending my voice out there as a kind of a prayer or a plea to these beings who have lived here a lot longer than me, and they know how to weather the storm. And it helped not only to like assuage my fear or anxiety at the moment, but it's a way to deepen my connection to this land, is
Yeah,
simply
totally.
like singing to these elders who are all around me. And that to me is such a beautiful thing. And I want everyone to have that kind of relationship and have available to them that kind of response. Like, what do I do when I feel lost in this world, when I feel all alone? To have something like a mantra or a song that they can sing to help them feel grounded and connected to the place.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And there, the indigenous inheritance is fundamental. You
Yeah.
know, we need to somehow, use or respect and really honor that inheritance and find a way to rediscover it. And this is what we teach in a way in our courses. We have this water song, that was given by those indigenous grandmothers. And they're
Mhm.
saying, we want people to learn those songs. We want people to sing to the water because we need to rediscover that water is the first medicine and its source of energy, nourishment, and connection. And so I have this beautiful story. A few years ago, I went to the north of Italy with my family, and our friend was hosting us had a newborn baby boy, like maybe a 3 months old. And I asked if there was a spring nearby that we could go for a hike up in the mountain. So she's like, yeah, there's this beautiful spring. It's about an hour hike. So at the time we had our two girls, 8 and 10. It seemed totally doable, an hour to hike with the kids. We went out there. We arrived at the spring. I brought a drum, some berries, some tobacco, which is considered as a sacred plant, that we use to make offerings. And we started to sing this water song and pray to the water, not even praying, just to acknowledge, let's say,
Mhm.
and do an offering, and a reverence to life and to beauty. And then we put the tobacco down, we put the offering, and we hear this cry coming about a mile west of us. And this hawk flew over us and started to turn around. And then we're like, oh, wow, that's cool, Right away, it seems there is a recognition. And
Mhm.
also, is this just a recognition or it's just like, well, it's happening.
Coincidence. Yeah.
Exactly,
Mhm.
But then the hawk went like this and dropped a feather.
Mhm.
It was just this most incredible thing,
Mhm.
like to say thank you, someone is here like giving something to life.
Yeah,
And
like
so
nature talks back.
nature talks back. If you do it, and you put your heart into it and you're humble about it, you root yourself, it's extraordinary. I've witnessed many different things like that. So I
Mhm.
took the feather and blessed it with the water and gave it to that newborn baby, for his altar when he grows up. And it's just so awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, special.
Yeah, I've had that experience like one or two times living here, that offering of a feather. It does feel like you just received a gift from the heavens.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just reminded, I went to the bathroom and on the back of my toilet, I have a whole collection of perfumes. And I've always loved, as part of the ceremony, the use of agua florida, the pusangas, the palo santo, the incense. Scent has always been really integral to my experience of ceremony. And this year I kind of got into researching just different perfumes from around the world, kind of branching out from essential oil and agua florida. And I love perfume so much. It never fails to kind of bring me to a time and a place, or even just a kind of a space, bring me to presence. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that, the use of scent in ceremony and these perfumes that are such a part of Amazonian plant medicine shamanism.
Yeah, so when we talk about vegetalismo, which is a word that was established by a Colombian anthropologist in the 80s, doing a lot of research around plant medicine in the
Oh,
Amazonian
Eduardo
basin.
Luna?
Eduardo Luna,
Hmm.
he wrote this great book called Vegetalismo, and it's really the idea that there's consciousness, you know, in plants, and there's a hierarchy in plants of power. They have different energies, different powers, and they can be used for different things. But in the practice of vegetalismo, you have all sorts of different practitioners. You have ayahuasqueros, but you have tabaqueros, people that use the tobacco in the same sense than ayahuasca. They drink tobacco juice and they journey and they diagnose the pathology in someone's field. You have people that take the pulse, like in Chinese medicine, pulseros.
Hmm.
You have paleros.
I didn't know that in the Amazon they're doing pulse diagnosis there.
Yeah, yeah, there's some pulseros and they can feel your pulse
Huh.
and they know what's going on. And then you have also perfumeros, people that actually prepare perfumes and drink perfume and use perfume to be in that trance relation perception, perceptive space awareness so they can actually interact and perceive in a particular way. So it's interesting. And even like when you break down, it's not exactly answering your question, but in the world of ayahuasqueros, you have also like specialized, practitioner. In the Shipibo way, you have the Ibwe, you have the Onaya, you have the Murayas, and you have the Chitaneros, also the Maleros, or the people that use this kind of energy also for dark influence or negative influence. The Ibwe is the one who extract any elements. The Onaya is a healer that sings and kind of advance in its connection to spirits. And the Muraya is the one who the spirit sits upon him, and it's not the human anymore operating, but it's more
Hmm.
the spiritual realm that is taking charge, a bit like a Yuipi ceremony for the Lakota people, if people know what I'm talking about.
Hmm. So someone who allows the spirit to incorporate them.
Yeah, kind of sitting on its back or its shoulders, like a bench. Also,
Oh,
we call about bancos.
this word murai, it comes up a lot in Icaros.
Yeah,
Is it
Muraya.
kind of asking the spirit to sit on you, or?
Yeah, it's like for me, the way I talk about it, they're like extensions. When you have dreadlocks, it's an extension, right? Or you have those different extensions that kind of brings those vibration of plants in different fashion and different manners.
Hmm.
And I have a song like that, that is a Muraya song. And it's funny because initially Jacques was singing that song differently, and then he got corrected by Guillermo Arevalo, who actually asked him to change from Shimaya to Muraya. And so I learned it that way with the Muraya extension. And anyways, those are little details on the practice. So the perfumes are made with different roots, the pidi and you have different kind of pidi Yaku pidi Yana pidi uh, Otolongo Piri Piri or the snake Piri Piris. And so each tribe, I guess, has a particular knowledge of certain plants that have been kept secret in their family or in their tribal system. And I remember working with Guillermo's mother, Maria Revalo, and she has this incredible way of preparing perfume with those PDPs that are very special and smells incredible. And so, you know, she would prepare your agua florida and adding a lot of roots in them. And basically, the alcohol allows those energies to be dissolved in it, you know, and to carry the scent. And because you're so open, you know, under the influence of ayahuasca, so the scent is kind of almost, you can see the scent, you know, the anesthesia effect when the perfume is presenting itself in the vision or in colors or almost like in sound. So there's different qualities there, and some perfume are more stringent and like electric almost in their scent
Yeah,
to
like
bring you
bracing,
back, you
wake
know,
you
and to
up, like,
just exactly. And some
yeah.
perfumes are more like for the love and the seduction
Yeah.
and to bring you in that heart space and that connection. And when you
Hmm.
are in that particular context, you know, there is a belief system that because you open your bandwidth so much and your consciousness, all sorts of energies can be in the middle. You have your own particular shadow that takes over, or behaviors or exposures. You can have also natural forces that might just manifest in the realm of the ceremony. And so the perfumes are also have the function to take away those energies they want to influence, you know, and through what they call the soplata, when you just blow those perfumes, you put some in your mouth and you kind of spread on the patient or in the room, it rebalances the energies, you know. And so,
Hmm.
like the tobacco smoke is used in that same sense. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's fascinating. And when I went to Africa in Gabon, they had exactly the same relationship with perfume and the roots, and they prepared those incredible bottles, you know, filled with roots and cinnamon and all those different flowers to create protection or to create good luck or good vibes. So
Hmm.
there's this whole idea that, you know, you just reinforce your connection to the nature and to those energies, those qualities of power that the plants carry due to their nature. Yeah.
Yeah. Like going back to what we were talking about, in the whole kind of woke culture, the accusations of cultural appropriation. One of my favorite examples of what I think more of as cultural exchange is the use of this American agua florida, Florida water, by the indigenous people of the Amazon, who I think were probably introduced to it through the rubber trade. You've got these rich rubber barons coming down to Iquitos and running their business from there, and probably their wives, probably some servants coming as well and bringing their cologne, this Florida water made in New York City. And
Exactly.
and I can imagine like an indigenous person like, oh my God, it's concentrated plants. Like, give me some of that. And they really, they appropriated this Florida water into their indigenous healing system. And that to
Yeah,
me
and
is like what it's all about is you get exposed to something, you find it's powerful, and then you incorporate it into your own culture and your own healing ways.
yeah, totally. And we can say more about that agua florida actually, which is funny because the agua florida that is now made in Peru, I believe, carries the same sticker, a copy of the original etiquette with like New York agua florida, you know, Lehman's brother or something like that.
Yeah,
But it's the
very
most,
Victorian.
it's the
Hmm.
cheapest ever possible perfume made on earth, where it's like full of chemicals and I don't know what kind of scent. And it's very popular because of its astringent quality. So it really, you know, wake up kind of the patient when it is used in ceremony. And you know, as you're talking about this woke movement, and I can understand also the importance of making sure the origin and the source of things is honored. But last weekend, I was visiting an incredible person who's from German descendants, who's a master in Chinese language, classical Chinese language, and a master in herbs and acupuncture, pulse diagnosis, and Qigong. And he was saying, you know, that tradition that we carry here, it's almost impossible to find it so well carried in China anymore because, you know, the Maoist culture has imposed a different language, a different mentality, a different way of life, and all those old lineages have been kind of lost. The
Hmm.
new generation don't have the mindset or the cultivation. But if you say something like that, and if a white person says that, it would just be bombarded by a bunch of accusations, you know, from the woke movement. And it's kind of sad in a way because it's someone who has 40 plus years of cultivation that can translate, you know, texts that comes from classical Chinese that very little people can do, few people can do, you know.
Hmm.
And it demands to be respected and honored because of he has given his life, you know, to these
Hmm.
practices. And it's almost like myself, I've given 30 years in the realm of study of plant medicine and ayahuasca, and I don't pretend to be a master in the field at all. I'm just someone who has a lot of mileage, you know, and but I've been exposed to a few things, and when you give your time, you know, that needs to be respected and to be
Hmm.
curious about it. You know, people have to ask themselves, wow, actually, maybe there is something to listen into or to learn from, you know.
Yeah, I think people who are just closed off to that idea, that they're small-minded, and look, good luck. I think you're missing out on a potential to live a healthier, richer, more interesting life if you feel like you're a citizen of the world. And you make a good point that sometimes these traditional ways are actually preserved through the cultural exchange. Like sometimes these practices have to go into cultural exile. And, I can think even from the Western tradition, something like astrology and alchemy had to be preserved in a Muslim culture because the Christian culture in Europe was wiping everything out. And
Yeah,
so
that's right.
for generations, it was continued and cultivated in this other culture and then like re-exported back to Europe. And that to me is beautiful. It's like more bigger picture thinking and seeing the way practices and traditions, not only sprout up in different places inexplicably, like the use of, perfumes and blowing perfume. It's like these people, it comes from a collective consciousness, right?
Yeah.
But the way things also move around and morph and change, if you look at the whole history of the world, it's happening all the time. And I think it's actually really beautiful. And it's something that unites us as people. And this like focus on all of the divisions and differences and walling ourselves off from others, to me is actually a product of the colonial mindset that the woke people are supposed to be against. It's like this kind of thinking is colonial thinking, that there's us and there's them and there should be no exchange. But it's kind of reversed, like we have nothing of value and they have everything to value, but we can't access that because we're not them and all of that stuff. I think it's kind of a tragedy in a way when I see people think that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's something to say about the trauma that has been imposed by dominant culture at the time, that hasn't been still resolved in their
Hmm.
collective consciousness. And, you know, as a white person myself, I'm trying to be conscious and aware of that too, and to honor it in the best way I can. You know, there is a history of slavery, there is a history of colonization. I didn't decide to be born as a white male today. There is a history of, you know, male dominance over female in the Western world. And now that there is a spiritual growth and we have access to more tools and more liberation in our consciousness, part of that trauma is being expressed in different ways. So I agree with you. We have to speak up to it, and at the same time, sometimes also, honor and try to find a way uh, to have that heart space for those who are suffering still from, this past trauma. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I mean, there's trauma on all sides, and um, yeah, we have to kind of find our way forward, having sensitivity in all respects, because we're moving into something kind of new, I think. And so none of us really knows the right way to do it, like the right way to kind of heal our own, Western culture. But we're doing our best and we're out there and like, please forgive me if I've overstepped in some way, but I'm just trying to like heal myself and help this culture along in a way, in whatever little way I can. So mistakes will be made, but I think we have to take some risks too.
No, I agree. It's part also of one of the cornerstone of the work that I do, not only to carry a lineage, which has been extraordinary for me in my own life journey, but really to think about what kind of conversations we can have together when we are aware and rooted in a relationship with nature, when we are in that capacity to understand and to hold, the fact that the space is listening, that the water is there. And so there's this collective consciousness emergent work that we are doing in community, where we really try to engage with language from a place of non-separation. And it's a little complex, but there is a real process that happens when people give themselves in that from a curious, open, empty mind state. And this intelligence merges and emerges from the field itself when we all become one. And, it's almost like, what's going on? And that is
Mhm.
just using language and conversation. And so part of my journey today is really to try to use the indigenous wisdom and that inheritance of non-separation and to place it in the context of a Western mind and open conversation to see how we can evolve, in our relationship to one another in our environment, how we can insert those qualities in the different mental health practices that we have so we can enrich our perspective and how we can actually create a better world together, as we become more aware and more conscious. And it's not
Mhm.
about this lineage or that lineage, this color, that gender or this gender. But it's just about being human, a
Mhm.
human with another human. And I hope this is where we're going and where we're landing, and we can just really understand that we share this beautiful planet together,
Mhm.
and
And tell me if you've encountered this as well, but what I've heard from indigenous healers and knowledge carriers is that they want to help us Western people because they see that we've lost our way and we're causing a lot of harm to other peoples and the planet. And so they want us to take their medicine in a way, not to steal it from them and to profit from it and to hold ourselves up as, whoever, but to to actually take the medicine so that we can do some healing. Um, it makes sense from like a kind of a global perspective that these people who have lost their way and are creating so much havoc on the planet, that people who haven't lost their way would look at us and go, well, they need some help. They need some of the medicine that we've got. And that's what I've heard over and over, whether it's the yoga traditions or the plant medicine traditions.
yeah, I think it's overall true that it's open for everyone to experience. There's a lot of tension maybe around people who want to learn and how they carry the lineage, or how they represent the culture, because unfortunately there's a lot of abuse, in the Western world with people just wanted to be seen with a certain image, wanted to represent something when they haven't really done, the real apprenticeship yet.
Hmm.
And that upsets a lot the people that carry those lineages, and I
Sure.
kind of strict about it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it happens also the way around, where, you know, indigenous people are also abusing the opportunity they have to just have some Westerners coming and experiencing something, you know, when they don't know what they're doing.
Mm.
But I talk a lot about those themes with my fellow brothers, indigenous and sisters, you know, and I'm a sun dancer. I go to Rosebud Reservation every year, and I was adopted. I'm part of the family. There's a lot of things that the chief and the community is sharing with us, and you know, we are somehow carrying that voice around, you know, and trying to take care of that culture of origin and to protect also its beautiful wisdom that is being lost. The situation on the reservation is very difficult. There's a lot of problem of addiction, alcoholism, and the religion is imposing also a certain criteria of how to interact with their traditions, which is very painful. And so in some cases, they don't know where else to turn, as you're saying. They're looking for people that are willing and they're going to really dedicate themselves to carry those traditions, you know. And so it's a complex conversation, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
complex time where we're in. I feel we have the obligation in our Western culture to protect, represent, and nourish this culture at source. And if we really want to learn, also we have the obligation to, you know, represent correctly and accordingly to the context, how they're used. And there's the third element. It's like everything is always an evolution. Where we are in a Western mind, in a Western society, in terms of our consciousness, is not the same context than a tribal, indigenous, you know, community, where they have a different interaction with one another and with their environment. And so to pay attention to that and to see how we can evolve with those tools and bring them in a different context for the benefit of the whole is part of the challenges of today, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of what I'm trying to do through our nonprofit Sacred Waste Foundation and our education platform, the Metsa series, like offering those reflections, opportunity to support the culture at source, give opportunity for the young indigenous people to learn their ways or get educated. And there's so many different layers there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's shift to that, to some of the outreach work that you've started doing. I think when you released the album, you were like kind of anonymous. You didn't put your real name attached to it. But in the recent years, you've built these websites. You've got this support foundation, but also I listened to your Icaros course on the Metsa series, and I loved it. I thought it was like the best presentation about like medicine music. And again, you weren't misrepresenting yourself. You weren't claiming anything other than being an experienced practitioner. And I thought it was like very respectful, but also very accessible for a Western person to get a better understanding of how the Icaros, the melodies, the songs, how they work, and how to maybe start to approach them and trying to sing them yourself. And I thought it was such a good presentation, probably the best I'd heard on the subject.
Thank you. You make me blush here, you know. And
Good,
no,
there's some humility
I
in
really
there. Good.
appreciate your comments. You know, as also someone who has been looking around and looking for content and comparing things and being exposed to a lot of different experiences. It means a lot to me. You know, I'm very grateful for those comments because it's a great deal. It's a big deal. You know, so initially we got invited, my wife and I, to participate in different organizations in that whole renaissance of psychedelics and conversations with research and psychiatrists and, you know, big shots. And then we realized actually there's very little conversations and understanding about the traditions
Yeah.
and what a, you know, a traditional Shipibo Ayahuasca do in
I know
sound.
it's so
And
focused on the substances and the molecules
exactly,
in the substance. Like it is taking that materialist mindset and applying it to something that you can't reduce it down to the material elements. There's so
right.
much more. There's the perfume, there's the songs, there's the smoke, yeah, so
Yeah,
please.
and so there is very little understood, and there's not a real curiosity, but there's a lot of, research done in some of the areas, and a lot of money that is being put in the psychedelic industry. So we felt it was important to create an organization that would be in the service of those cultures and to create a fund for indigenous elders that are the holders of altars or medicine. And so we started there, and then we amplified to the youth, wanted to help them to have access to their lineages, but also to an education so they can be in both worlds. And then we amplified to infrastructure to help those elders have the appropriate material so they can express their medicine or even receive Westerners to share with them, and also we open to the realm of artists. So it's a beautiful journey we've been on now for 2 years. We're still kind of at the beginning. I think in 2 years we fundraised like around $200,000, and we're able to help a few families and create a few infrastructures. And at the same time, a lot of people were saying, we need to hear your voice. You need to start to teach about your experiences. And I didn't want to do something that felt that I was extracting the knowledge.
Mhm.
So I created a series of free content courses. I call them mini courses in the Metsa series. So I call it Metsa series because my medicine name, Shipibo name is Metsa anyway, good wind, and start to like organize that with an artist and do all that, presentation work and recording. And then I tied it up back to the nonprofit. So that material is accessible to the public, it's free. And then people can support the source the way it comes from. And now I am in this also adventure of training people, and I'm merging, some of those lineage inheritance tools in the context of the Western mind and the Westerner's needs, to have a better resonance and understanding of nature energy. And so
Mhm.
we have meditation, we have Qigong, we have songs, we have offerings, and we have a whole conversation of how to root yourself in that practice, how to build your awareness and discernment, and how to grow in that new capacity that is, as we were saying, part of what it is to be human today. And so
Mhm.
we have those two platforms, and we are just growing and looking for, opportunities to create more content and to pass it out there so it can be used for the benefit of all. Yeah.
Great. And you gave me a sneak peek of this new album that you've been working on. And you've really expanded on some of the little tricks and techniques from the first album. It's very different. I mean, it's very kind of not traditional in some ways. There's a lot of different instruments used. You've got more voices in there. I think some of your kids are singing.
Yeah.
So it's a very kind of different feeling. It's like an expansion of that first album, which felt like this could be a Shipibo guy in a Maloka who some, producer recorded and added a little bit to. But this one is more, there's a lot more play and experimentation even in the music, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, the first album, there's a few songs too, with the harp. But in that second one, I feel more confident. I feel more free. A lot of the songs are traditional, but I play them a bit differently, putting my little kind of grain of salt. The Iropaya song, Iropaya Supakaju Puntai Matai Mari, with the bass and all that sound effect. I love that song. So yeah, it creates this, effect where you really feel under the weather when you listen to it and in
Mm.
ceremony. And those Shipibo songs, there is one particular long Shipibo song in the album I'm always thinking about how can you sing an Ikaro to a general public who haven't been to a ceremony and bring that experience, bring that feeling of the medicine. Of course, you carry it in your intention when you sing it in the prod, but also what are the effects that you can put in place that then, it feels like, wow, I'm really like into something amplified. And so the repetition and the loop, the echoing effect are like, weaved in to try to represent that.
Hmm.
And then in this second album, I'm very blessed to have my two girls, Emma and Charlie, which are really good singers, and Kelly, their mom, my wife, to participate and to be part of this. It's a beautiful adventure as a family to have the kids, uh, give their love for that. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I have to ask you, I was listening my
Mm.
walk yesterday, and in the headphones I could hear a little better than like more nuanced than I could on the speakers. And I could swear on one of the tracks where I think you're layering your voice that there's some auto tune used. There's something that happens to your voice, but I know that you can do a lot of different effects with your voice. But I wonder, I've thought, wow, that's maybe the first time auto-tune's been used on an Icaro. There's something that sounded quite kind of electronic or robotic in a bit of the voice. I wonder if
Huh.
that was intentional or if that was just some effect of the singing.
I don't know exactly which song you're referring to, but in the studio, we did a lot of work, behind the screen, listening and building the blocks together. And then you come one day and you sing, you perform, but then you come the next day, you have a bit of phlegm or in the right vibes. There's all those different things going on, or you're a bit off. So yeah, here and there, I think we kind of adjusted,
Hmm.
maybe some of the things that were off. And I work with a really good sound engineer in Woodstock, upstate New York. It's quite cool to be also kind of building this whole thing, what you can do today with technology. So
Hmm.
trying to merge best of both worlds, the traditional and the intention carried in the vibe of the song, but also like, okay, how can we use those tools in a good way?
Yeah. And I wasn't kind of calling you out for using autotune or anything like that. I actually thought there was something about it that reminded me of like when you're under the effect of ayahuasca, sound can kind of play like that. Like it can sound like robotic or electronic music in some way. So I thought it was actually like using some studio technology to evoke the kind of the weirdness of the experience that you can sometimes have or often have in ceremony. Like I remember
Yeah,
once,
it's possible, because
yeah.
at the end, I'm super paying attention to the sound, the quality, and the feeling. And so I
Mm,
always try to weave in something that represent what I'm looking for. And one aspect that is very important just to say here that maybe the audience knows, but some songs, they just come in one time. You're aligned, you're in the medicine, and suddenly this tune just comes in. The words in Shipibo, you have like this bag of archetype words and meaning that you put together like a Lego. But then
mm,
the rhythm and the beat and the tonalities depends of the feeling and what's going on. And then you build your song with what you're seeing or with what you want to be doing and just bring the meaning together. And that's very special to, in particular to the Icaros. And at the end, it's very universal. You just like tap to source, make yourself available. It opens up and delivers. Again,
mhm,
it's the same mechanism of really understanding the whole network that we're part of.
mhm.
And so to get out of self-absorption is really the challenges of today.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. I was kind of searching for language on, I was talking about the signature melody that a particular healer would have. But yeah, you've got like a bag full of archetypal words and images, and then you put them together in the moment, kind of like Lego, and you construct this Icaro. Yeah, yeah, you hear that quite a bit. Yeah, there's particular yeah, little phrases that show up again and again, and it's like if it's got the right amount of syllables, you drop it into this melody because it fits like a perfect piece of Lego. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I had recorded because the song is gone, and the next day I can't remember it,
Yeah.
And they just came in and you just enjoy so much. Sometimes I'm just enjoying so much that tune that came in. I don't want to stop singing because I know it's gonna go. Yeah,
Yeah, I know that feeling. You walk around for days repeating this melody and it just sticks in you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I found like maybe some like advice for people who are starting to learn some medicine songs. For me, I find like that they pick me in a way. Like if there's a song that I hear somebody singing and I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. I want to learn that." Unless I'm meant to carry that song, I can't remember it or I can't get it. But there's certain songs that just stick to me like a burr and I can't shake them. I keep singing them and those are the ones I remember. And so I've learned to kind of just trust, like if I remember it, if it sticks to me, if it resonates with me in a particular way, that maybe that's a song that I'm meant to carry. And the other ones I just got to let go because they're not for me, maybe not for me at this time, maybe in a couple of years it'll come back. But what's your process of like developing a repertoire? Is it something like what I described there?
Yeah, I think it's similar and different. Um, there's a few things in learning songs from, a lineage or a spiritual practice. First, it's good to ask permission or to at least know where the song is from, you know. And then um, you want to learn from the heart. So a lot of the process for me has been first to really absorb the tonality, even if I'm not in the perfection of the words, but to really carry the feeling, the feeling of the songs. There's a lot of Lakota songs like that I didn't really understand the meaning. I was wrong in some of the pronunciation for years. And then finally, I was with the right person. I could ask all those questions and I understood, okay, this is how it should be done and how it should, but I was already in connection with the essence of it, you know. And so that's really what you want to be transmitting. And then it's very important to how you carry yourself around the songs, and to be humble about it, to be quiet about it. And at some point, the process is extraordinary. Like you learn certain songs and you learn them so well that you don't have to think about it, that it's just come through. It's like when you do a yoga repetition of a movement. At the beginning, you have to adjust this and that. And then at some point, you're just in the flow with it and you can let go the mind and just be in the movement. And then there's another layer where at some point, it is a song that wants to be sung. And the song comes through and it has its own spirit, and it's just want to be expressed in the moment. And that comes with time, you know. Um, and then your own routing mechanism, so how to carry those songs is very important, and just to not take it too seriously, but also to be serious about what you want to do with this,
Mm.
and,
Yeah, my
and to
yoga
give it
teacher,
time. Yeah,
my yoga teacher would talk about it like your practice in this way. He would say, you know, take it seriously, but not without humor.
yeah,
It's like you apply yourself to it, you do you learn how, like you said, where it's from, what it's for, you do it over and like I think about like yoga practices. I do a dieta of different practices. So I commit myself to it for months and I see what the effects are over time before I can then teach it to anyone else. And so I've dieted all these different yoga postures and breathing practices and mantras, and I've got my like medicine bag of yoga practices. So very serious in a particular way. You take it seriously because it's like it's powerful stuff and it comes from somewhere else and all of that, but not without a sense of humility and humor, which I think
Right,
is
right.
the sign of any good practitioner is they haven't lost their sense of humor and maybe they've even increased it.
Exactly, much more. This is really cool. I just took a look at time. I'm sorry for
Yeah,
that. And I don't know if I have to go pick up the kids.
we
Uh,
we got to wrap up anyway, but I think it's a good
okay, my
place.
wife says, unless you're done early, you can go. Let me just text her. Sorry about that. So like
It's
this,
all
we have
right.
time to wrap. Cool. Yep,
You good?
I'm good.
Well, it's been really great chatting with you. What's coming up for you? Like, what's any new offerings for the Metsa series that you're thinking of?
I'm in a big like transition right now. It's the end of the year. The last 2 years have been beautiful, but it's also hard to do it all yourself. So we're really trying to build a team or people, be in a position where we can attract more funding for the nonprofit, you know, and be in the capacity to give and support all those different lineages. And then in the Metsa series, um, we want to keep teaching being and becoming, which is the course we do online. So that is doing well. We had a first year with 3 cohorts, and it's been very powerful, very beautiful. But at the same time, we want to develop the self-taught content that people can have access to a bunch of different themes and be more aware of the practices, be more aware of the tools of integration, be more aware of the risks. So it could have a great impact on also, society and just in prevention, integration, which I think is very important today as the psychedelic opportunities to experience are more and more available. So we are in that transition, and hopefully we're going to find the right people to come in, people that want to invest in that business and help us create this content. And so that's where we're at. We are taking a break now until April. April 4th is our next cohort in Being and Becoming. And January, February, we're going to do more cultivation, going to Peru for dieta, going to the moon dance with my wife, who's also a moon dancer, and trying to really think about how we can produce those different self-taught courses, outreach for investors, and develop those projects for indigenous people. So yeah, it's a beautiful adventure, and if it manifests like that, we'll have, in a couple of years, a catalog of tools that I think will help to think about psychedelics from a different perspective and will give a road, a mapping of integration that is out of the box, that really help people build their relationship to space and evolve in their consciousness and capacity. So
Hmm.
uh, looking forward to do more on that regard. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks again for sharing with us and for spending some time with me and putting up with all my questions.
No, thank you for having me anytime. Let's do it again.
Yeah, cool. All right, take care, man.
Good to see you. Much love.